Welcome to the channel where lessons lead to sound impressions. Class is now in session. Now, as you can tell from the title of this episode, this is a tutorial in the proper setup for playing the double bass. Now, I will be going over some material that I went over in my first video, but I'm going to expand upon that, okay? I'm going to talk about stance in this video, and stance will include feet, legs, back, shoulders, and instrumental angle, okay? So with all of that being said, let's get started, shall we? So let's review a little bit. So we're going to pick up the instrument and we're going to do the same things that we did in the first video. Now I used my larger instrument. In that first video, I'm using my smaller instrument this time, okay? But you do the same exact things. You grab here and you grab here, okay? And what I do, and you get a nice good footing, okay, so you're stable. You lift the instrument up so there's no sliding. Also want to make you aware that I also had these bumpers installed on this instrument. Okay, now this instrument is, I would say, a high school quality instrument. Okay, but you still want to protect your investment. Okay, so now let's go into stance. Okay, I won't bother to put it down because it's basically the same thing as picking it back up, and you'll see that in video 1. Okay, so let's go with stance. Let's talk about stance. Now obviously the end pin is all the way in, and I'm about 5'11", so in proper playing position, this would actually be too short for me, okay? But I will demonstrate for someone who is shorter than I am, and perhaps will need to have the end pin all the way in. Now, a little later on, after this, I will take the end pin out, and I will demonstrate again how the instrument should be positioned in the standing position, okay? So I have my feet at this point about, as far as the toes are concerned, about 1.5 feet away from one another, okay? And again, I just want to say that the end pin is all the way in, and I normally don't play the instrument like this, okay? So my feet are about 1 foot apart at the toes. If you notice my legs, they're very loose. Now, I'm sorry, but viewer discretion is advised. I'm sure my legs look a sick, horrible mess, but this is this is for educational purposes. So, anyhow, I just want to show you what my legs look like. Now, my legs are not like this, okay? And they're not like this. They're relaxed. They're relaxed, okay? So it doesn't matter how tall you are or how short you are, your legs should be relaxed. Let me go right back to our feet for a quick second. You also want to be evenly distributed weight-wise on your feet, okay? You don't want more weight on one foot than the other. You want to be evenly distributed on both feet. That's going to really, really help, okay? Let's go on to our back and our shoulders, and then I'll get into instrument angle. So now let's talk about our shoulders, our back, and instrument angle. Okay, so we already have our feet and our legs planted properly. talk about our shoulders. Our shoulders should be relaxed and down. Okay, when you're playing, when you're not playing, doesn't matter. Your shoulders should be nice and loose and at their lowest point down. Now, let's talk about our back. And again, I use the word controversial because a lot of people do this quite incorrectly, my opinion. So I believe in doing things in the natural way when it comes to playing a musical instrument. So you see that I'm standing straight up and down. I'm not hunching. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing this. Okay, all those different things will lead to problems that could be preventable right now. Okay, so the back has a natural curve in it. Okay, so if you're standing straight up and down, you are creating that natural curve in your spine. Okay, that's what you want. Now, I'm not going to show my spine because, like I said, I don't want, I don't have to, do the viewer discretion. Anyhow, I like natural, absolutely natural. So you have your shoulders down, you have your back straight, and now you're ready for the instrument to come towards you, and now you're ready to come towards the instrument. Okay, so again, I'm about 5'11". This instrument is too short for me because the end pin is still all the way in the instrument. So the instrument is not elevated where I would normally play it. Okay, but if I were shorter, what I would do is I would get a little closer to the instrument. Now, as far as my left foot is concerned, that should be about 7, 8 inches, 9 inches from the back of the instrument on the floor. Okay, so about 7 inches, 8 inches from the back bottom of the instrument. So that now, when the instrument comes back, you come forward. The torso comes forward. Okay, not like this, but the back and the bend of your spine is still the same. So the instrument comes forward, the instrument comes back, you come forward. Sorry about that. Okay? And you basically form the letter A, the capital letter A. Okay? So now, that's your instrument angle. Now let me tell you something else about where the instrument should be hitting you, because again, this instrument is, at this point, it's too low to the floor. Actually, I'm going to pick it up a little bit. I'm going to take the end pin out, and I'm going to show you how I normally play it. Okay, so you have this part of the instrument. This part of the instrument. This part of the instrument should be hitting you where your belt is, where your belt normally is. Okay? That's a really, really good guide for that. So right now, the instrument is hitting me. That part of the instrument over here is hitting me where my belt would reside. And what you want to do is you want to get your buckle away from the instrument. You want to pull your buckle around to the right, okay? Because you don't want to scratch your instrument. You really don't want to do that, okay? And so now, when you have this part of the instrument hitting where your belt would normally be, you create a pivot point, okay? You create a little pivot point. Now I'll show you, I don't know if you can see, but I'll show you where my hand is, okay? That's going to be That's going to be your controlling factor with your pivoting. The instrument should freely pivot. I know you can see my hand down here. So maybe I'll just leave my hand down here as opposed to up here, because going over the left hand will be in video number 3, okay? So that's what you have. You have your shoulders down, your back with the natural bend, okay? And you have your angle, your instrument angle. Whereas you come forward a little bit, your torso comes forward, and the instrument comes back towards you, and you both form the letter A, okay? Now let's talk about when you are seated, okay, on a stool. So again, I like to talk about balance. And so you see that both of my feet are up on the stool rungs, okay? I believe that it is not so wonderful to play with one foot down here and the other foot up here. I believe we should do what the cellists do, okay? And the violinists and the violists do. If you're gonna have both feet on the floor, then have both feet on the floor. Okay, some people are taller than others, so their angle is gonna be a little different, okay? Even seated on a stool, you want to make sure that your feet are up together, okay? It's very important. Easy example, you know, a lot of us ride a bike. Maybe we don't have a bike, whatever. But when you're pedaling, you have one crank that is attached to one pedal on the right side. You have another one that's attached to the pedal on the left side. Can you imagine if one crank, when you're going around, was half the size of the other crank? It wouldn't make any sense. One foot would be doing this, and the other foot would be doing this. It would be crazy. So I like to talk about balance, definite balance. Okay, you're either going to play with both your feet on the floor while seated, or you should play with both feet up when you're seated. Now let's talk about the stool. Now this is the best stool that I could find some 20 some odd years ago, maybe even more. And it has proven to be a very strong stool. Now the rungs are not exactly even. It's the best I could find at the time. But if they're like, I don't know, maybe that much off, it's fine. It's fine. But you don't want to do this, whereas one foot is down and the other foot is up, I believe. That, to me, can throw off the balance of your spine, throw off the straightness of your back. All right, so if you're going to be sitting on a stool, and we've already gone over shoulders and your back having the natural curve in it, you want to be able to engage the instrument properly. So now let's go back to pizzicato. If you're pizzing, look at this. You have the natural bend of the arm. You come forward a little bit because you want to always engage the instrument. You don't want to play the instrument like this because you'll be chasing the instrument. Okay? So come forward a little bit and you do as we did before. Okay. Now let's talk about something else that I talked about while we were standing. I want to talk about pivoting. Okay, I want to talk about pivoting. Now, while seated, if we wanted to access the G string easier, we would move the left leg forward. We would move the legs actually closer so the instrument would pivot this way. If we wanted to access the E, we would have to pivot the instrument that way so that we can use and take advantage of the C bout. Okay? I'm going to show you what that looks like from behind. So now I'm playing on the E string if I had a bow. But if I wanted to play on the G string, I use this leg to bring the instrument this way, bring the G string towards me. Okay? If I don't want to play on the G string, I want to play on the D string, have the instrument like this. If I want to play on the A string, like this. If I want to play on the E string, so you see the difference of the instrument angle. You never want to chase the instrument. You always want the instrument to come to you, okay? You are the living, breathing entity. Your instrument is not, okay? So also, as far as end pin length, I already came to this clip with the end pin at a certain length that I like to play this particular instrument, okay? So whatever your length is when you stand, okay, you should probably put the end pin in maybe 2 or 3 notches. Maybe 2 or 3 notches so that the instrument is lower so that you can properly access the instrument, okay? Now, let's talk about the right arm. So the difference between how a double bassist would bow and how the arm would look while bowing the instrument is quite different from how the cellist, the violist, and the violinist would bow. Okay? Now we need here, because of the length of the instrument, the cello, the violin, and the viola, they can't play like this, because if they did, since the instrument is so small, they'd actually be playing underneath the bridge. So you don't want to do that, okay? So for double bassist, if I were bowing, the arm would have natural bend. Once again, viewer discretion is advised with this, because I'm sure my arms look a hot, angry mess. Anyhow, but this is for educational purposes. So as you can see, my arm is performing its natural bend. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that, okay? Natural bend of the arm. The violinist and violist, they have to bend their arm to bow. Even the cellist sitting down, they have to bend their arm to play. We cannot. We cannot. We should not. I mean, yes, we can, but if you do that, if you bend your arm while bowing, you cut off a lot of power, a lot of natural power and weight that would normally sit on the bow and on the strings. Okay? So right now, I want to go over a little bit of pitsing. And that will be in the next segment of this. So when we're pitsing, we have the thumb over here. Now there are many different ways, many different places where we could pluck or play pizzicato on a bowed string instrument. Today I will only go over one way, okay, because there are many different ways. Now remember when I said that when we bow, we should play with the natural bend of the arm, not like this, not like this. Well, if we were to pizzicato over here, we'd actually be playing where the rosin would collect in order for the bow to play and make the string vibrate. We don't want to do that now. Playing down here is another technique that we're not going to go over today. What we're going to go over today is where you just want to feel good. You just want to, pluck the open strings. Okay, so my hand is now over the bass side of the instrument, the lower side of the instrument, and it's pulling on the E string. Okay, now you notice that I have my thumb over here under the fingerboard over here, and you have 2 fingers. You can use 1 finger, you can use 2 fingers. If you want, you can use 3 fingers. It doesn't matter, but I think you can use 1 or 2. It's fine. Okay? And what you want to do is you want to just boom, boom. So this is the fingerboard. This is the string. My thumb goes under the fingerboard. My 2 fingers go on the string, and I do this. Okay? So, here we go. The E string, pizzicato. So you just, okay? Let's go to the A string. Your thumb stays in the same place. Your thumb stays in the same place. Your A string. Now notice what I did. I didn't come all the way back here. I have the E string over here. So when I pluck the A string, now my fingers rest on the E string. Okay? I don't have to go, I don't have to do that. When you want to stop pitzing, that's it. Your fingers rest on the lower adjacent string. Okay? Let's go to the D string. Same principle. Now, notice where my fingers are resting. My fingers are resting on the A string, the adjacent lower string. Now, let's go to the G string. Same principle. I pluck the G string, and my fingers are resting on the D string. Now you may have noticed something else. I'm leaning in, but also maybe you notice that while I was plucking the E string, the instrument was like this. When I was plucking the G string, the instrument is like this. So you have that pivot point. Remember that pivot point I was talking to you about over here, where as this part should hit you where your belt is, this part of the instrument. So when you go from the low end of the instrument, the low string, to the high end, the higher string, you should bring the instrument to you. Bring the instrument to you. Okay? So E string, A string, D string, G string. And then we go back. Okay, so we don't want to play like this because it's like we're too close. It's like going to a movie theater and being in the very front seats looking at a blockbuster movie. Okay, you don't want to do that. Okay? But you also, on the other end, you don't want to have the G string over here. You don't want to have to chase after a string, okay? So if anything, okay? Now I exaggerated a little bit. You don't have to move so much, but you know something? It helps, even with this. And that's what you do as far as angle is concerned. That's doing that. Learning this pivot will play a major part for when we have to bow the instrument. And then you'll really see why these C bouts, again, are very important. Okay? In this first slide, you see a score of all the bowed string instruments. You have the violin, the viola, the cello, and the double bass. But notice something about the double bass. There's an indication over here, 8VB, and that simply means in Italian, ottava bassa, or play it one octave lower. Okay? So that's going to come to be very important in our following slides, because as I said before, the double bass is a self-transposing instrument. It's already done for us. Okay? Now I want to just go over what transposing is. It is to cause two or more things to change places with one another. Okay? So you're going to see this as I go further and further into this topic. So when a bass player in this slide sees this particular note, which is E, and I'm going to go over what the hertz value is and, all that sort of thing, very shortly. But for now, I just want to go over notation. So when a bass player sees this note, okay, this note, the note that is actually being played is this bottom note, okay? And that's going to become very significant a little later on. So this is what you see in music. However, this is what you hear. This is what you actually hear. And I'm going to keep saying this, for all of this, for these slides. Now I have depicted the double bass open strings. So we have E, we have A, we have D, and we have G. And again, this is seen in music. This is what we read, okay? However, on this second stave, this second line over here, these are the actual notes that are coming out of the instrument. These are the actual notes that are coming out of the instrument. Now, I know you remember when I talked about transposing, okay? So this instrument, the double bass, is a self-transposing instrument. It's already done for you, okay? So our instrument transposes at the octave. So when we see this note and play this note, we sound these bottom notes here. This is just one octave or 8 tones lower, okay? So here as an example, we have a fundamental. And we have a new word here, hertz. But I'm going to talk about that very soon. But we have an example here of a 2-to-1 ratio. Okay, so we have the fundamental, and then we have a note that is 1 octave higher, okay? Twice the amount of waves, okay? So it's going to, so consider this curve to be this note. However, we don't read down there traditionally as bass players. We read up here. This is what we see. This is simply what we hear. So actually what we read is actually twice as high
as what we hear. It can be very confusing, but you know something, you will get it. It's not a problem. Okay? Again, I have all these arrows and everything here. Strings of the double bass. So again, what we see is not exactly what we hear. What we see when we play these notes, we actually hear these notes. Okay? And I'm going to get into the hertz value of these notes because that's going to become very, very important. Down here, as I have a blue arrow going to the second stave, we read music at twice the hertz value than what we hear. Okay, so you have this going to where we see what we read. We have the blue arrow going to what is actually heard. Now, we're getting into another word that you've heard me use before, hertz. Now, this particular note, which just so happens to be E, which just so happens to depict our lowest string on the double bass, okay? So when we play our E string, we see this note in music. However, this is what we actually hear. We actually are hearing approximately 21 hertz. That means this note is vibrating 21 times per second. Okay, 21 times per second. Okay, it's very low, but we can hear it. Again, we have what's read. Down here we have what's heard. It's just abbreviated a little bit. Now these numbers are according to the standard A440 hertz frequency. Okay, so I'm not going to even try to sing that for you, but but I think it's I think that's A440. Okay, so forgive my non-singing voice. So if you go back to the first depiction, that A440, it's in the violin staff, and it's the third note. That note resonates at 440 hertz. Okay? Just to give you an idea. So now, when we play our A string, which is our second lowest string, we actually hear this, and this is the actual hertz number. 55 hertz. 55 times per second that this is vibrating to produce this pitch. And we're going to get into frequency, we're going to get into pitch, and we're going to also get into something else that's coming up. Now we're going to get into loudness or intensity. But before we do that, I was talking about frequency before, which was measured in hertz. Frequency is simply the number of sound waves or vibrations per second, and that is measured in hertz. So when you have a certain value in hertz, it's going to produce a certain note in music. If it's percussion, then it can either be a regular note or it can be a noise, because not all sounds that come from a percussion instrument are actual notes. Okay? So now we have something called dynamics or amplitude, loudness. Okay? So here, with that, it's the amount of invested energy in a vibration. So whether we play these notes loudly, these are the loud dynamics down here on the bottom stave. The softer dynamics are up here. So it doesn't really matter how loudly, how much energy we put into these pitches. Okay, and pitch, that definition is a standard degree of highness or lowness used in performance. Okay, so if we go back to this slide, when we play our string instruments and they're in tune, we should get numbers like these. We should get numbers like these. Now, musicians really aren't thinking like that. This is, scientific. However, when we tune to basically an A440. Now, as far as this slide is concerned, we have dynamics, which I was talking to you about before. And like I said before, we have the softer dynamics on the top, and we have the louder dynamics at the bottom. Now, this first dynamic is what we call in music triple P, or pianissimo. Okay, it's very, very soft. The next one is double P, or pianissimo. So it's just very soft. The next one is piano, which is soft. Then we have mezzo piano. So we're actually getting louder. We're actually coming from silence. Okay, and of course, composers write even more P's for effect. Okay. Now, let's go down to the bottom staff. Now we have here mezzo forte. Forte. So this over here is medium loud. Then we have forte, which is loud. Then we have fortissimo, which is very loud. Then we have fortissimo, which is very, very loud. And of course, composers can write as many F's as they want. Okay? So I want to just give you a basic understanding of how we are tuned. We are definitely tuned in fourths. Let me go back to the first slide. As you can see, we are tuned in fourths. So we have an E. The next space up would be F. The next line up would be G. And then the next space up would be A. So the distance between E and A would be what is called in music a perfect fourth. And it is the same thing. It's the same basic type of formula. Okay, so from A to D would basically be two spaces, or actually one space and two lines. Over here, it would be one space here, a line here, and a space. Okay, so they alternate, but it's basically a fourth from one another. Okay, now the upper strings, the cello, the viola, the violin, their open strings are actually tuned a fifth apart from one another. Okay, so I'm going to go back to now explaining what the different parts of the double bass are. double bass anatomy. So let's start from the top and work our way down, okay? With some explanation. Okay. So we have something called the headstock. And this headstock houses a few things. The peg machine, the peg box. In this instrument's case, the extension, which extends the range of the instrument going down, okay? And one other thing, this black piece of wood here, that's called the nut. And without this nut, the strings wouldn't be stable. They need to stay in one space. Without this, the strings would just fly off if we were to play the instrument. Okay, so very important. And we're going to see something similar to this, but at the other end of the instrument. Okay, so now, moving lower, we obviously have the fingerboard, and you want to keep this as clean as possible. I have a little tutorial and some tips on that in my first video. Very important to keep this clean. Okay. Also, in the back of the fingerboard, we have the neck. Okay. And the neck has a few parts to it. So this part of the instrument, of the neck, it's called the heel. Okay. And this part here, the button. Okay, so maybe when you were in 5th grade or something like that and your teacher told you rest position, you laid your hand right here as a bass player. I guess you didn't know that you were laying your hand on the heel of the instrument. Okay, moving on. So now we have the upper bout, okay? And we have the lower bout. This whole part of the instrument is called the belly, okay? We have the shoulders of the instrument. And they're the uppermost part of what is called the ribs of the instrument. All this, the side of the instrument, this side of the instrument, it's the ribs. Okay? They hold or connect the front or the belly of the instrument to the back of the instrument. Now, we already went over the upper bout. Oh, this is the upper bout. This is the lower bout. Let's get to the F holes. They're called F holes because they look like the letter F. But these are actually also one of the mouths of the instrument. If you were to put something here while you were playing this instrument, it would actually mute it like this. It would actually mute it. So these are very important. We have the bridge, okay? Very important to keep this clean, and also very important to keep it straight, okay? When bridges start to flex up or point upwards, you need to make sure that you can knock it back down, or maybe loosen the strings and maybe push it back down very carefully. Okay? We have the feet of the bridge, and they stand on the body of the instrument. Now, the double bass has something that the other three instruments don't have. These adjusters. These adjusters push the bridge closer. They pull the bridge closer, they push the bridge further. See, in the wintertime, in the summertime, the instrument expands and contracts. Okay? So what happens is that when that happens, the strings get either closer or further away from the fingerboard. And when the strings are too close, when they're played, they can buzz. And we want to always avoid buzzing. If they're too far away, it may be more difficult to play the instrument. Okay? Let's talk about something that is not really easy to be seen, but extremely important. Inside and on the inside of the belly of the instrument, there's something called a bass bar. Okay, if you were to see when an instrument is being put together, there is a vertical piece of wood, a thick piece of wood that almost runs the length of the inside of the belly of the instrument. That is for structural integrity. There's a lot of force being put on the belly of the instrument due to these strings have to be under tension for us to play. Okay, so we need that bass bar. The violin, viola, cello, bass, they all need the bass bar. On this side, on the treble side of the double bass, there's something called a sound post. And that's simply a wooden dowel that is movable, unlike the bass bar, that's not movable. Okay, that's glued on. The sound post can actually move, and you can actually feel it. You can actually, if you were to put your hand or put your fingers very carefully inside of the F-hole, you can actually feel the sound post. That too is for structural integrity. Because again, the double bass, all 40 strings under tension, put about 200 pounds of force on the belly of the instrument. So that's a lot of force. Okay? So both on the lower or bass side of the instrument, we have the bass bar. On the treble side, or where the upper strings are, we have the sound post. Now let me talk a little bit about the sound post. It not only serves as a strengthening agent, it also can determine how the instrument vibrates and how it sounds. So in the summertime and in the wintertime, I always talk about that. If it's hot or cold, the instrument expands and contracts. Okay? So when the instrument, let's say, contracts and it sounds like this, well, maybe the person will have a winter sound post where there's not so much pressure inside from an extra, I guess, a long wooden dowel. So I'll actually put in a slightly shorter dowel, okay, so that the instrument can vibrate much more freely. And when the summer comes, typically instruments expand because of the humidity, the heat, and everything. They will put in a longer dowel, okay? Typically. I don't have my sound post change. I only have one sound post. It stays in there. you can even have the sound post moved if you want to change the sound slightly, change the sound of the instrument. I don't mess with that personally. I just leave it alone. I like the way the instrument sounds. Okay? So, moving on. We have the upper bout, like I said before, and the lower bout. Well, we have something else that's extremely important on string instruments. This part over here, it's called the C bout. One, because it's shaped like the letter C. But this part of the instrument is also very important because without it, the bridge itself would have to be somewhere out here. Because when we're playing with the bow, we need the clearance. We need the clearance when we're playing the lower string and the upper string. We need the clearance. And if we did not have these C bouts, every single one of these string instruments would be a little unwieldy. And especially this one, it's already a big instrument. Can you imagine a bridge coming all the way out here because we're trying to clear it when we're playing? It's no good. So this is built in to the instrument. Okay? Moving on and moving lower, we have the tailpiece. Okay? Very important. It allows the strings to be strung and it gives them tension for when they've been strung up over here with the peg machine. Now let me tell you a little bit about the tailpiece. A wonderful tailpiece can make your instrument project more. There have been some studies with that. You can do all kinds of decorative things with the tailpiece. It can change, like I said, it can change the sound of your instrument. Some people don't have a tailpiece. Some people don't want to have a tailpiece. So they'll just have a cable, which I'm going to talk about a little later on. They have these cables, which will attach to all four strings, but they'll have no tailpiece. It's very interesting. Very interesting. Okay? So let me go to the back of the instrument before I get any lower, because I don't want to forget anything. So like I said before, we have the back of the instrument. Okay? We have the back of the instrument. We have also the button. Now let me talk a little bit about the button. Okay? It could be, for one, a place where they can set the neck. It could be a structural thing, okay? Or it could be a cosmetic thing. Sometimes makers want to put a little extra piece of wood that's perhaps different or maybe the same. Who knows? You know, it's up to them. But this part of the instrument at the back of the heel is called a button, okay? Now I want to talk about something that it's a little difficult to see. Maybe I'll try and zoom in with it. Maybe I get a little closer. This line along the side of the instrument. Many string instruments have them. It's called purfling. Purfling, okay? And it serves basically as a decoration. Some instruments don't even have purfling, okay? Purfling is normally made out of really, really thin pieces of wood, okay? With less expensive instruments, the purfling can be painted on, okay? So if you have an expensive instrument, more than likely you have real purfling. Okay, so
Next, I want to talk about what's at the very bottom of the instrument. All right, so what am I going to do? Alrighty. So let me see if I can lift this very safely for the instrument. At the bottom of the instrument, you'll see two cables, okay? Those two cables attach and hold the tailpiece together. And it allows the tailpiece to have the strings tensioned across the fingerboard, the nut, the bridge, okay? Those two cables, which I'm about to show you, I don't want to hold it up while I'm talking because it's a big instrument. I don't want to, it's heavy. Those two cables, which I'm getting ready to show you, are extremely important. If those cables break, and I've seen them break on some of my students' instruments, the strings all of a sudden, they come out of tension, the bridge collapses, the sound post, since it's not glued inside of the instrument, that could also collapse. So it's very important to get really good quality material for the tail gut, okay? And those are those two cables that are down there. And there's a tiny black, well, it's small, I wouldn't say tiny, but there's a black piece of wood that looks like this. This is the nut, as we were saying before. Well, guess what? There's another type of nut down there, and you're going to see that as well. But that's not called the nut. That piece of wood, which those two cables run over to go to another part of the instrument, which I haven't talked about yet, that small piece of black wood that's down there, that's called the saddle, okay? And let me tell you what that is for. There's, like I said, there's a lot of pressure on this. There's about 200 pounds or more pressure that the strings are creating, okay? So can you imagine? Can you imagine? Can you absolutely imagine? Sorry, my computer went off. That this saddle wasn't here. This wood is softer, is much softer than that ebony. So we need a strong wood to be able to make the cable go from where it hooks onto the tailpiece over to another part of the instrument, which now I must show you. That part is called the tail rod. Now people say, oh yes, that's the, pull out your end pin, that's the end pin. Well, the end pin, or that metal piece that comes out so that you can raise the instrument and play it, okay? There's another part to that. That part is the tail rod, okay? So as you can see, you might see, I hope you can see, the saddle, which is that black piece of wood. I hope you can see the two cables. That's the tail gut. Okay, and now there's a thicker part. It's a gold part and a black part that's circular. Okay, that part that seemingly comes out of the bottom of the instrument, that is the tail rod, and inside of that tail rod lives the end pin. You also see the screw used to release the end pin so that you can adjust it to the height that you need in order to play the instrument properly. Okay? Whew, that's a lot. One other thing that I forgot to mention, or maybe I didn't. The headstock houses the extension. On this instrument, I have a fingered C extension. Okay, so this part of the instrument does quite a bit. Does quite a bit. Okay, so I believe that is everything, I think, about the anatomy of a double bass. I hope you learned something. There are two things I forgot to talk about. I knew there was something I was forgetting. It's a lot. I'm going to talk about something that you can see very clearly, and then I'm going to talk about something that you may not be able to see very clearly. The first thing I want to talk about are the corner blocks. Okay? These are the corner blocks. Okay. Now, if you look at a violin, they can be very ornate. They can even come out, protrude out. I've seen many decorative corner blocks on double basses. To me, I think they are controversial because this instrument is big anyhow, and if they get hit, they can easily be broken off. So personally, I tend to stay away from instruments that have really big, ornate corner blocks. Okay. The other thing that I wanted to talk about is the arching, and that's very, very important. So with this instrument, as you can see, as I hope you can see, it's arched here in the back. It's not flat. Okay. In the front, there's some arching as well. That's for strength, okay? That's for strength, so that the instrument can withstand the pressures of the strings. It's also so that the sound can travel better in a round atmosphere, in a rounder atmosphere. Okay, so I want to talk about arching, very important. Now, some double basses have a flat back, okay, and a round top. Or some double basses actually have a flatter tops. Others have a more arched top, okay? Personally, I tend to stay away from flat backs because they have a tendency to crack, okay? So you need that flexibility, I believe. You need that flexibility of an arch. Hopefully you can see it in the camera. Okay, I personally I like that. So those are the two other anatomical parts of the double bass that I think we need to cover. Okay. So today we've covered a lot of different things. We covered some review material. We've covered stance. We've covered the speaking range of the instrument, the self-transposing nature of the instrument. We've covered how sound travels with this instrument. We've covered the anatomy of this instrument. And lastly, pizzicato. So I'm sorry that the video was a little long. I'll try and make video 3 shorter, and you should watch out for video 3 because that video will encompass the left hand, left arm, wrist, and all that. Okay, so I want to thank you for visiting my channel. Please like, subscribe, share, comment, as this will help spread the word with people who don't even play my instrument and people who do play my instrument. Okay? So again, I'm Dr. Bass. I hope you've gotten my gist. Class is now dismissed.